Hi. Our next writer is Angela Ogburn, and Angela is a freelance writer with publications in academia as well as literary anthologies. Holding a master's degree in psychology, her work explores how life's seemingly inconsequential moments lead to building a lasting collaged framework in the psyche. Angela Ogburn.
So what I have tonight for you guys, can you hear okay? That's all right. I have two poems, a piece of flash fiction, and then I'm going to finish off with an excerpt from a young adult novel that I wrote last year. So I'm going to start off with the two poems. The first poem is called A Last Moment of Her. Sand and sable was cheap perfume my mother wore. It came in a foggy white bottle kept firmly in her purse. Ladies with purple-tinted hair, I found, often had that smell, doused thickly between their gray memories and the church pews where they left it lingering. I always thought it bitter, the way it smeared across my cheek and followed her fingers into my hair. But I found myself breathing it in when she was gone. Once at church, she wandered from her seat at the piano bench, and I swore if I were my little button-nosed kitten, I could have found her hiding place and not run all over church crying that she had left me. But she was funny like that, never forgetting to bring it along. And it's funny what the sterile smell of white walls and a dripping of the IV can bring and almost make one forget. And when he came in and told me it was time, I walked over and kissing behind her ear, found it had tucked itself neatly there. The second, you guys are nice. The second piece, or the second poem is called A Day Like June. A day like June, busy zinnias and yellow marigolds grew around us. I sat towards the sun, holding nothing and everything with my pen, while you kept the smell of green peppers, juicy pineapple, fresh zucchini, and chopped chicken against the warm breeze of charcoal. The music rose and fell against the sound of hose water, Kool-Aid being shaken, instructions about sweet and sour sauce. A Saturday we'd perfected. Maybe it was my pen that brought it on. I thought about those days that came before, the little parts of this green and black world we left bits of ourselves in. Gritty bars and ripped up sheets, early mornings. We thought it funny then, running into each other at the grocery store or along a crowded street. It's funny to remember when a smile didn't mean more than you were paying, or a song didn't say more than it said. And now a little apartment downtown, a deck with overgrown vines, and us having it all on a day like June. The next piece is a piece of flash fiction. It was published by Main Street Rag Publishing in one of their anthologies called Porches. The title is On the Porch, Not Talking About My Father. My legs, beaten up by blackberry thorns and dining ants, poke out like tree stumps across the hanging porch swing. My grandfather rolls up the heel of his foot towards his toe and back again. What do you see? He asks, his silver frames inching down his nose. Emerald froth bubbles on the surface of the pond, staining the white underbellies of ducks. The tip of a rowboat knocks against the pond's edge, its rusty sides powdering like cinnamon. Fish bubbles, I whisper, knowing this question, having learned this answer. His eyes widen and he scrunches his nose. Yellow teeth peek out as he mouths, yes. The fish, he says, looking across the olive-stained water. We can't always see what's there, can we? My head nods in a rehearsed moment. I remember our first practice of this, peppermint carnations spread across the casket's glossy birch. It disappeared into the hearse as we walked down the steps of the church. What do you see? My grandfather asked, his silver frames inching down his nose. My grandmother walked through a processional of Boy Scouts, my brother's fingers wrapped around her own. Women in black hats dotted the corners of their eyes and shook their heads. Cutting off the moment, my grandfather lifted my chin and painted the sky with his finger. We can't always see what's there, can we? What do you see? He asked. I searched the sky, seeing only the white clouds pushing through the blue backdrop. "My father?" I whispered. His calloused hand cupped my face as I leaned against him. This is the way we talk about my father, on the porch, not talking about him. But we don't always say what's said, do we? So it wasn't until after I submitted these to Anne that I realized I had two with very heavy death themes. So, sorry. The next one is a lot lighter. So the next is from a young adult novel that I wrote last year, and it is right now called I Knew You Yesterday. So this is still towards the beginning of the novel, and what's happening is an 18-year-old girl has just been given the high school graduation present of going down to Georgia. She's from Chicago, and she goes down to Georgia to learn more about her father and her father's family. She's never met them, so. So here she is at the airport waiting for her father's sister to come pick her up. Cars moseyed along in the passenger pickup lane of the airport as drivers craned their necks looking for people. An older woman with dyed jet black hair stood next to me, showing her grandchildren a charm bracelet. Each one's birthstone dangled from it, all cut in the shape of a heart. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help but watch her mouth as she talked. Her tongue rolled around in it like a pig in mud. Even though I'd seen nothing of Savannah but its airport, it was hard to imagine Mom growing up here in what she affectionately called the armpit of Georgia. She lived here until she was 25. Not that anyone could tell that from the way she talked. She was as good at getting rid of her accent as she was her past. But it's always made me wonder how many Southerners really had that thick as molasses twang. But if the airport is any microcosm, I have my answer. It's the norm, that's 2 syllables if Southern. A camouflage truck with monster-sized tires roared past, burping exhaust and blaring country music. Right behind it, a black boxy pickup truck blasted around the corner. The brakes squealed as it jerked to a stop. A woman with a hairstyle screaming, "I'm still trapped in the 80s, sat behind the steering wheel. I stood up as she flung the squeaky door open. She marched around the hood of the car, then stopped dead in front of me, her hands on her hips. Her vacuum-sealed shirt read boy toy, and she wore cut-off denim shorts. Gold hoop earrings dangled from her ears, and her right ear was dotted all the way up with gold and diamond studs. Though I didn't agree with her fashion choices, her makeup was flawless. Her smoky gray eyeshadow blended perfectly into a shimmery white glow on her brow bone. Eyeliner matching the color of her eyelashes, no clump mascara, subtle rosy blush. It all looked perfect against her tan skin and sun-bleached hair. Of course, she showed her age, but what the wrinkles on her face gave away, her chiseled arms made up for. It was Debbie. "You Emily?" she asked. Swallowing hard, I stepped toward her and reached my hand out. "That's me," I said, my voice shakier than I'd expected. She grinned, and a line of her cherry red lipstick cut across the front of her teeth. "You look like your mama," she said, "but you got our James family nose." She winked, then did a double tap on the tip of my long, skinny nose. "Just look at you, all grown up." My hand still hung out limply for her. Finally taking it, she awkwardly tried to twirl me around. Not expecting this, my fingers slipped mid-turn and my feet got twisted around each other, but she didn't notice the clunky exchange. Stepping in close, she wrapped her arms around me. Her stale cigarette breath and the tart smell of chemicals from her hairspray filled my lungs. After what felt like a minute, she finally let go. Grabbing my shoulders, she positioned me into attention. "I'm Aunt Debbie," she said. "I know you haven't seen me since you were 3 years old, but I'm Aunt Debbie. Got it?" Tasting blood, I realized I was gnawing at the corner of my bottom lip. I slid my top lip over to try and cover it. With her hand still cupping the balls of my shoulders, she stared at me like she was waiting for an answer. I nodded, trying to remember if she'd asked me a question. "Are you as quiet as your mama?" she asked. I started to ask if she had Mom confused with someone. There was nothing quiet about my mother. If anything, she had a talking affliction, an allergy to shutting up. "I guess," I said. Debbie swooped an arm around me and grabbed my suitcase. Her tricep bulging, she one-armed it easily into the bed of the truck. "Although your daddy was like that too. I mean, hell, he was a librarian." My father, a librarian. I let it hang for a moment between us. You coming? Looking up, I saw Debbie sitting behind the steering wheel, patting the ripped-up passenger side seat. The truck purred as the engine rattled. I've always wanted to be a librarian, I said. She gnawed on the tips of her blue fingernails with her front teeth and tore off a tiny crescent moon-shaped end. After turning her head to spit it out the window, she smiled sweetly at me, like I was a child. Isn't this something, after all these years, she said, plopping her hands onto the steering wheel. Leaning back against the seat, she motioned for me to get in. Let's go, little librarian. Thank you.